My name is Cleo Castonguay, Cleo Castonguay, and I'm the president of the St. Michael's Conference in Exeter, New Hampshire, and also the board chair.
Yeah, so you have a vision for this, and one thing leads to another, and now it's kind of become more than maybe you thought you could achieve when you first started out.
Oh, never thought of it.
No.
Never, never. And people come and knock on our door and say, hey, no one's doing this. The only people around who can do it is the Society of St. Vincent de Paul, because everybody else only do food stamps. They only do fuel assistance. Whereas they walk in here, we do the whole gamut. All three, social, economic, and health.
So we happen to be here at the Feast of St. Vincent de Paul when we think back to his example. He was trying to be creative in his time frame. You'd have to appreciate that if he were able to visit you for one of your conference meetings or stop by here for a tour, he'd see that vision, wouldn't he, of being creative?
Well, I hope so, because the way I see it, he was walking in Jesus' footsteps, and I walk in his. I know his story very well, and I know I can't even touch his robe, but that is one of my goals, is if Vinny did it, Cleo is trying to get as close as he can to doing the same. Just to show you, this is his house. You don't fool around here. He knows, he wants to make sure that we are doing things right. And so we had a stump right outside this door over here. And so I'm walking by, we had a day we're working on the trees. And I'm looking at the stump, and the guy who just mowed had cleared about 6 inches from the stump, and I'm saying to myself, oh boy, now we've got to get a trimmer. And so I walked maybe 12 feet, and there's a gentleman who's walking down the steps, and he yells out at me. And he says, you need help with the trees. I says, no, we're almost done, we're in good shape. So he walks over and he says, do you have any stumps? Now I'm 69 years old. In all those years, nobody's ever asked me if I had any stumps. And I says, well, ironically, I got one right over here. So he walks over and he looks at it and he says, that's no problem, and takes off. So we go back to working on our trees, and all of a sudden, and I've been in construction all my life, I can hear something coming down the street that sounded like a tank. The rumbling was unbelievable. And all of a sudden, this huge machine, nothing like I've ever seen before, jumps over the curb, comes over, and grabs that stump and just disappears. People are coming from all over. What is all this noise? So I go over to tell them, this guy just showed up. I turned around, and he's gone. I've never seen the machine again, nor do I know who's doing this. 2 days later, Herb is walking out the door, and there's a man with a wheelbarrow next to where the stump used to be. So he goes over and he says, did you pull out the stump? He says, no, but he says, I live up the street, and he says, I had this wheelbarrow full of loom. He says, I was wondering what I was going to do with it. He says, this guy showed up, and he says, why don't you bring it down to St. Vincent de Paul, fill that hole? He says, I also had some grass seeds in my pocket, so he came over, filled it, seeded it, and we still don't know who that gentleman is.